Okay, so imagine this, right? Imagine you've got like this awesome museum, but it's not for paintings or sculptures or anything like that. It's a museum for your best Instagram stories.
Oh, wow.
It's there 24/7. Anyone can visit.
Hmm.
That's kind of the power we're diving into today, Instagram highlights.
I love that analogy.
So in this deep dive, we're going to break down exactly what these highlights are, why they're so crucial, especially if you're, trying to build a following or a brand or whatever your Instagram goals are.
Absolutely.
And we've got some killer tips from the popular Instagram growth podcast I was listening to. So we're really going to get into the pro strategies here.
Awesome. Can't wait.
All right. So first things first, what are Instagram highlights?
Okay, so think of them like permanent collections, right, for your stories. But you get to organize them by theme.
Oh, okay.
So like this podcast gave the example of if you're a photographer, you might have a highlight just for like events you've shot. Or maybe if you sell products, you have a highlight showcasing like customer reviews or behind the scenes stuff.
Right, like sneak peeks, that sort of thing.
Sure.
So it's more than just like saving your stories from disappearing after 24 hours.
Way more. It's about strategy. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's about like controlling the narrative. You're deciding what people see first when they hit your profile. That first impression, super important.
I never thought about it like that. It's
It's
like
true.
you're curating your own little Instagram exhibit.
Yes. And the cool thing is, it's not just about the function, right? It's also about the visuals.
Oh, yeah. That's what this podcast was saying, too. Like it's part of your branding.
Big time. It's got to look good, right?
Yeah.
Think of each highlight like it's a mini portfolio.
Oh, interesting.
So one highlight might be all about, let's say, your photography work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another one's for your travel adventures.
So it's like different sides of you, but all curated.
Totally. And it's like visual. You're drawing people in.
Okay, this is making so much more sense now. So let's get into the how W2, step by step.
Let's do it.
So you make a story like you normally would.
Yeah.
Picture, video.
Yeah. Add some text, maybe a sticker, whatever you like.
Gotta add those stickers.
Right. And then there's this little highlight button at the bottom.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that.
So you tap that, and that's where the magic happens. You can add it to an existing highlight, or you can create a brand new one.
Gotcha.
And don't forget to name your highlight something catchy, so people know what it's all about.
Like, what would you name yours?
Well, if it was for my photography, maybe something like captured moments or through my lens, something like that.
Ooh, those are good. I like those.
Yeah. Gotta be creative.
Now, this podcast mentioned a trick. You see, you can post a story, save it to a highlight, but then delete it from your main feed.
Ooh, yeah.
Why would someone do that?
It's all about that curated look. Like, maybe you don't want every story to live forever on your profile, but the best ones, those deserve a highlight. So it's like choosing which photos to print and frame,
Only the best of the best make the cut.
Precisely.
Okay, I'm totally getting this. So you're picking and choosing different themes, different galleries almost, right?
Exactly.
Now, what about those highlight covers? I've seen some that are like so creative, they really pop.
Covers are huge. They're the first thing people see, so they got to grab attention, It's like walking down the street and seeing these amazing posters for different exhibits.
Oh, yeah, like inviting you in.
Exactly. So you don't just want to pick any random image. It's got to be on brand. It's got to match the vibe.
Okay, so it's not just about having great stories in the highlights. It's the whole package.
You got it.
The presentation matters.
Absolutely. You want people to be like, whoa, I got to see what's in here.
And that is where the design stuff comes in.
Whip time. Think about your colors, your fonts, maybe even your logo, if you've got one. It's all got to work together, tell a story visually.
So it's like taking your branding and applying it to this mini museum of your best stuff.
Exactly.
This is so cool. I'm already thinking about all the ways I can revamp my Comboy highlights.
Right. It's exciting stuff.
It is. Okay, so we've got the basics down. We know what highlights are. We know how to create them. But how do we actually use them strategically?
Good question.
It's one thing to have a pretty display, but how do we make them work for us?
Right. That's where the real magic happens.
It's one thing to have a pretty display, but how do we make them work for us?
Right. That's where the real magic happens. Remember how we talked about each highlight being like a mini portfolio?
Oh, yeah, like those different galleries in our Instagram museum.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's say you're that photographer we were talking about before. You've got all these amazing photos, right? But they're not all the same. You've got portraits, you've got landscapes, maybe you've even get some like macro shots, close-ups of flowers or something.
Well, like those artsy detail shots.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of just lumping them all together in one giant highlight, you can create separate ones for each style. So you might have one called Faces and Places for your portraits, another called Wild Wonders for landscapes. You get the idea.
So it's about showing off your range, giving people a taste of everything you can do.
It's like a sampler platter of your skills.
Over art.
And it helps people find exactly what they're looking for, too. If someone's specifically interested in your portrait work, they can go straight to that highlight and see all your best stuff.
And because you're also building your brand on Instagram, it's kind of like giving people a peek behind the curtain, right?
Absolutely. People love to see the process, the story behind the final product.
Like, I know you do these amazing behind-the-scenes videos on your stories.
Oh, yeah. I love showing people how things come together. And you can do that with highlights, too.
So you can have a highlight called, like, Behind the Lens or something like that.
Exactly. And you could fill it with clips from your photo shoots, maybe show your editing process, talk about your gear, all that fun stuff.
It's like a mini documentary of your creative journey.
I love that. And it makes you so much more relatable. People see that you're a real person with a passion, not just some faceless brand.
Right. It's about building that connection.
Totally. Now, another thing I've seen people do really effectively with highlights is using them to capture events or trips.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that. Like if someone goes to a conference or something, they'll have a highlight dedicated to it.
Exactly. Imagine you just got back from this amazing photography workshop, right? You create a highlight called Workshop Adventures or something.
So cool.
And you fill it with photos of the locations you visited, maybe some group shots with the other participants, highlights from the lessons.
Oh, and you could even include like testimonials from people who attended.
Yes. Social proof is gold. It shows potential clients or customers that other people have had great experiences with you.
You're totally making me want to revamp all my highlights right now.
I know, right? It's exciting stuff.
It is. But before I get too carried away, there's one thing I really want to touch on. Accessibility.
Oh, yes. Super important.
I know that's something you're really passionate about, making sure everyone can enjoy your content.
Absolutely. We want to make sure our highlights are inclusive and accessible to everyone, regardless of any disabilities they might have.
So where do we even start with that?
Well, the first thing is captions. Make sure all your videos have captions so people who are deaf or hard of hearing can follow along.
Right, because even if a video is super visually engaging, if you can't hear what's being said, you're missing out on half the story.
Exactly. And captions are good for everyone, honestly. Think about it. You're scrolling through Instagram on the bus, no headphones.
Oh, yeah. Happens to me all the time.
Captions let you still enjoy the content without disturbing anyone around you.
Right. They're like a win-win for everyone.
Totally. And while we're on the topic of accessibility, let's not forget about alt text for images.
Alt text. Remind me what that is again?
So alt text is basically a description of an image that screen readers can read aloud for people who are visually impaired. So instead of just seeing a blank space where the image is, they can hear a description of what's happening in the photo.
Oh, that makes sense. So it's like painting a picture with words.
Exactly. And don't just be generic with your alt text. Like, don't just say photo of a sunset. Describe the colors, the mood, the composition. Really bring that image to life for someone who can't see it.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. It's amazing how something so simple can make such a big difference.
It really can. And the great thing is Instagram makes it super easy to add both captions and alt text. It's just a matter of taking that extra minute to make your content accessible to everyone.
Okay, so we've got our highlights looking good, telling a story, and they're accessible to everyone. Now, how do we know if they're actually working? Are there any tools or metrics we should be paying attention to?
Great question. Instagram actually gives you some pretty decent analytics for your highlights. Yeah. You can see how many views each highlight gets, which stories within the highlight are getting the most engagement. It's pretty insightful.
So it's not just about setting them up and forgetting about them.
Nope. You got to track your results and see what's working and what's not.
So it's like any other part of your Instagram strategy. It needs to be data-driven.
Exactly. And here's where things get really interesting. You can actually use highlights to drive traffic and conversions.
Oh, tell me more.
So let's say you're a photographer, right? And you offer online photography courses. You could create a highlight all about those courses, maybe call it Level Up Your Photography or something catchy.
Okay.
And you could fill it with testimonials from students, before and after examples of their work, maybe even a little behind-the-scenes look at the course content.
Oh, so it's like a mini sales funnel right there on your profile.
Exactly. And then at the end, you include a call to action, telling people to swipe up to visit your website and enroll.
And all those design elements we talked about earlier, the colors, the fonts, they all come into play here too, right?
Absolutely. It's all about creating a cohesive and persuasive experience. The visuals draw people in, the storytelling keeps them engaged, and the strategic call to action leads them where you want them to go.
It's like a perfectly choreographed dance.
I love that analogy, but there's one thing I want to caution you against. Overstuffing your highlights.
Overstuffing.
Yeah, like putting way too much content in them. I've seen highlights that are like a mile long, and it's just overwhelming.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely seen those. You start scrolling, you're like, okay, I give up.
Exactly. It's like going to a buffet and trying to eat everything. You just end up feeling sick.
So it's quality over quantity.
Always. Each highlight should have a clear purpose and a curated selection of content that supports that purpose.
Makes sense. And speaking of things to avoid, what about those generic highlight covers that just use, like a stock image or a random icon?
Ooh, yeah, that's a big no-no. Your covers are prime real estate on your profile. You got to make them count.
So invest a little time in creating something custom, something that really represents your brand and the content within that highlight.
It's worth the effort, trust me.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about using highlights to showcase your range, to tell a story, to drive traffic.
We talked about accessibility, analytics, avoiding overstuffing.
This is like a masterclass in highlights.
I know, right?
I know, right? It's a lot to take in, but it's all good stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely. Game-changing stuff once you start using it.
Okay, so just to recap, we covered so much about highlights today. From creating them.
To making them look amazing.
To actually using them strategically as part of your overall Instagram game plan.
Yes.
It's like way more than I ever thought about before. I was just kind of throwing stuff in there.
I think a lot of people do that at first. It's easy to just see it as like a place to save old stories.
Right, exactly. But there's so much more to it.
Way more.
So for our listener, the one who's like really trying to build their photography business on Instagram, what are some actionable things they can take away from this?
Okay, so first thing, really think about those highlight categories. Like we keep saying mini portfolios, right?
Yeah.
So make sure your highlights really show the breadth of what you do. You mentioned you've been playing around those food photos, right?
Oh, yeah. I love them.
Yeah.
Still learning, but...
Those are perfect for a highlight. It's like a whole other side of your photography, right? It shows you're versatile.
Okay, yeah. I never thought about it like that.
So create a highlight just for those. Call it something catchy like culinary creations or art on a plate, something like that.
Those are so good. I got to write these down.
Right. It's got to grab attention. And then it's not just about the photos themselves. Think about the story you're telling within that highlight.
Okay, yeah, the storytelling thing. You keep saying that, and I'm getting it, but give me an example.
All right. So with your food photos, imagine the highlight starts with shots of all these colorful, fresh ingredients. Then it moves into the cooking process, maybe some action shots of you chopping veggies or stirring a pot. And then, bam, it ends with these beautifully plated dishes, like art on a plate.
Right. Oh my gosh, yes. So it's like a whole experience.
Exactly. It's like taking people behind the scenes of your culinary adventure.
I love it.
And remember those design elements we talked about?
Yeah.
Consistent colors, fonts, all that. That's what ties it all together.
Right. So it feels professional and branded and all that.
Exactly. It's those little touches that make a big difference.
Okay. So we've got the visuals, we've got the story, but what about actually getting people to book a shoot or sign up for a class or whatever?
That's where that call to action comes in. Remember we talked about that?
Oh, yeah.
So let's say you're doing a special promotion for family portraits in the fall, right? Create a highlight just for that. Showcase some of your best family photos. Get some testimonials from those happy clients. And then for your cover image, make it really clear what the offer is. And tell people to swipe up to book.
Oh, so it's like a little ad, but it's also showcasing my work.
Exactly. And then don't forget to use that link sticker in your stories so people can just tap and go straight to your website.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. Make it super easy for them.
Right. You don't want them to have to hunt around for the link in your bio or anything.
Okay, this is all making so much sense. I'm feeling way more confident about my highlights now.
That's what we like to hear. And remember, this isn't like a one-time thing, right? You can always go back and update your highlights, add new stuff, change things around.
So it's like an ongoing process.
Exactly. And as you get more comfortable with it, you can start experimenting with different types of content. Like, don't be afraid to throw in some videos or boomerangs or time lapses.
Oh, right, mix it up.
Exactly. Keep it interesting for people. And remember those analytics we talked about. Check those regularly. See what's performing well, and then do more of that.
Oh yeah, data's king. Got to pay attention to that.
Totally. All right. So as we wrap up this deep dive, any final thoughts for our listeners out there?
Ooh, good question. What's the one key takeaway you want people to remember?
I'd say this. Think of your highlights as a living, breathing part of your brand.
Oh, I like that.
They're not static. They're always evolving, just like you are as a photographer, an artist, or a business owner, or whatever it is you do.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to experiment, try new things, and let your creativity shine through.
Beautifully said. I think that's a perfect note to end on. So go forth, dear listeners, and create amazing highlights that tell your story, captivate your audience, and help you achieve your Instagram goals.
Yes. Rock those highlights.
And that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. We had a blast exploring the world of Instagram highlights with you today, and we hope you learned a ton of valuable tips and tricks.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of social media.